You're trying to be as relaxed as you can, but the relaxation that for Westerners is a complicated difference between the Chinese term. The best way to describe relaxation is to not have unnecessary tension.
Mm.
So a lot of times we hold our bodies in a wrong posture, and that puts extra tension into the body.
My guest for this episode is Jonathan Snowiss, a long-term practitioner and teacher of Chinese martial arts and Qigong. John began training at a young age, studied Qigong through Pitzer College, and continued his training in China. In this conversation, John makes Qigong practical. We talked about what it really is, where the myths come from, and how simple ideas like breathing, posture, relaxation, and structure can help martial artists train better and train longer. Let's get started. Hello, John. Welcome to the Shugyō Podcast.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward for this conversation. This is the first time I have a Qigong master on the podcast. But before we get started, I wanted to find out more about your Qigong journey. How did you get started?
Well, back when I was 11 years old, I was diagnosed with epilepsy. And then this is where the story starts to get more interesting. About the same time, my mother and her colleague at Pitzer College discovered this Qigong master. And then he gave a public talk at the school, and we thought it was really interesting. And that means really cool. And so my mother saw it as something that could help me with my controlling the seizures. And I was 11. I love Star Wars, so I thought it was, Jedi stuff. But it turns out it was a lot different than what the Jedi are doing. So I got more into this after a few years, just going into like the movie ideas of things. And it's a lot more interesting, a lot more in depth, and a lot more fun.
And then if I remember correctly, the master only speak Chinese, right? So obviously at that time, you don't really speak Chinese yourself, right?
No Chinese whatsoever at the time. I got basically hello and thank you.
So how does it works with the training? So I would assume that, the master will give you some sort of technique to work on. And then I would also assume that you feel better with your body. Can you walk me through that? Like at what time or in how long did you practice when you feel better about your situation back then?
Back then, when I was starting to practice, I had to be told to practice because I didn't have the discipline, and it was, what old people did.
Mm-hmm.
I was the youngest student by like 30 years or something. So it's like, oh, that's what old people do. But then when I was about 15, 16, 17, something like that in high school, I started to really get into it. And then I practiced for at least a couple hours a day. And that would be with the Qigong practice, martial art practice, and meditation. So I fit it in as much as I could in my daily life.
So what makes you change from the, kind of skeptical or kind of loose practice schedule than, when you become a teenager, right? Then did you find out more about the possibility of what it could do? So that kind of intrigued you to do more?
I started to actually really fall in love with the philosophy of Taoism. I'm not really a Taoist, but I love the ideas of how Taoism works. And so I started doing more practice, and I got more into it, more interesting, I guess you can say, sensations through the body, my understanding, my calmness, just better understanding. I was able to stay more calm during a lot of different things. And so I just kept on going, and I just kept going with the more and more practice.
And then did it help with your condition?
It did.
How long did you practice, and when you feel that, oh wow, I don't even notice, or is it still with you, or with Qigong you actually?
Yeah, I still have the seizures, so I have to be mindful about that. but I'm able to control it more when I start to have one. I can, not every time, but sometimes I can do some basic Qigong moves and it will calm my body down. I can get over the seizure before it gets too much.
You actually went on the really cool path, in my opinion. You actually study Qigong in college and you actually travel to China and deepen your study. Can you walk me through that process? Like how, when you decided, this is really what I wanted to do, I wanted more and more and more, and then you continue that path.
Well, yeah, when I was in high school, I was practicing a couple hours, as I was saying, and then I went into college. I went up north for a couple years, but I'm kind of that stubborn, pain in the neck kind of student where I really know what I want to study, and nothing up there fit what I wanted to study. And I knew that I could actually create my own major at Pitzer College. So I was able to create my own major there. I called it Qigong, no, mind body healing Qigong as my major. And I was able to take Chinese classes, philosophy classes, religious classes, any kind of class I could figure out how to put it into my major, I was able to.
When people think about the word Qigong, they think about the soft movement and then the slow breathing. So for martial artists asking you that question, what would you say to them? Are they missing something that they should have known?
Well, the breathing and the slow movements are a very big part of the external part of the practice. And the breathing is the way of controlling how you can relax the body. The more you relax, the deeper the breaths, the more relaxed you can become. And you're working more with your structure than you are with muscle movement. You're trying to be as relaxed as you can, but the relaxation that for Westerners is a complicated difference between the Chinese term. The best way to describe relaxation is to not have unnecessary tension.
Hmm.
So a lot of times we hold our bodies in a wrong posture and that puts extra tension into the body. So the soft breathing and the softness, that it just allows the internal structure of the body, the bones, tendons, ligaments to take over and stabilize a person. There's two parts to the Qigong. There's the yin side and there's the yang side. So the yin side is mostly on the soft part, and actually most of the practice is like on a yin side. But you have to balance it out with the yang. So there is some tension, but that's to make the muscles and the body move in a certain way. And that tension and relaxation actually helps the chi flow go through the body. It also helps the blood flow and everything else. There's a lot to that part of the practice, making it both a yin and yang practice.
Is it a 50-50 type of?
Not even, no, not even a 50-50.
No. Like how would you
No,
balance it? Or it depends on the practitioner.
there's the more soft kinds of practices that would be more for medical, like medical Qigong or spiritual practices for Qigong, where they do have some yin, I mean, mostly yin, but some yang. And then there's more of like the hard Qigong, which is a lot more yang, a lot more hardness, like breaking bricks and stuff like that, which are just kind of like a sideshow part of the practice. But that hardness is actually based off of trying to maintain that yin side of the practice. So a lot of times people who go too yang, they really damage their hands, their bodies, and things like that. One master I was working with, he talked about he had coffee with another master, and the master had a iron fist or iron palm too much that he couldn't even lift a cup in his hand.
Wow.
It was so damaged, but it was so powerful that every time he touched a cup, the power was so powerful it would crack. He would break the cup, which sounds impressive, but you really messed up that one hand, and then that's going to hurt the rest of your body as well.
That's interesting that because I was going to ask you a follow-up question. Is Qigong only for Chinese martial arts. I practice karate myself. There are a lot of people, practitioner in MMA, jiu-jitsu, judo. Can a different style martial arts practice their yang side with their forms, maybe their punching, but also be benefit from the Qigong itself? So it doesn't have to be Chinese martial arts, right?
No, it can be anything. And the way I look at it is anything you do can be Qigong because Qi is life energy. It's more complicated than that, but it's life energy and Gong meaning skill with it. So Qigong can be done for, in a general term, and I'm being very loose with the term, can be eating, walking, sleeping. And my master, when he was in his training, he did everything that would be Qigong. So he would sleep on a split bamboo stick. That's what his bed was for like 3 years or whatever it was. And he would have to, every time he did walking, he had walked out, and that would be part of his practice. Every time he had to run was part of his practice. Eating healthy was part of the practice. So it's all over the place. In my opinion, the understanding body mechanics, understanding how to breathe, understanding mental focus, that can be done in any martial art. So people who want to say that martial arts doesn't have Qigong are really limiting themselves
Hmm.
to only being a physical thing. And when you only have it a physical thing, if you noticed, as people get older, their martial arts skills start to deteriorate. Not as fast, not as quick. Bad knees, bad hips, or whatever. But when it comes to doing with the Qigong, that part actually helps heal you. You can be more relaxed, therefore you can be quicker, be more mentally balanced, all kinds of things that would benefit martial artists of all styles.
That's very interesting, right? The difference between a regular athletes and a world-class athletes is the world-class athletes can go to total relaxation and total tension in quick of a second. For us general people, like we will think that we're relaxed, but we're not really relaxing. But when we think we're the most tense, we're not tensing enough. I think that's kind of like the mentality that you have when you on the inside, you got to be able to learn how to relax even when you're walking, sleeping. But then on the yang side, when you need to maybe break something or when you need to make force, you need to know how to use your energy to move that flow. Is that kind of the yin yang balance that we should look after?
Those are things I would say not look after or look for, but be aware of, and then allow the body, allow the mind to start to understand. And then in the process of practicing, people would be able to actually put those things into practice. And it's a slow process because most tension, people have no clue that they're tense.
Yeah.
So like an example, when I've worked with a lot of students, I'd have them doing a basic stance and they're say, I'm relaxed, but I look at their fingers and it's all curled up. They're like, oh, I'm relaxed. Kind of, but not really, because the tension of the going to close the hand. But when you open the hand, it's actually more relaxed because then the tendons are not being pulled in, muscles are not being pulled in, they're being let go. So the relaxation goes through into the fingers.
That's a really good example.
It's kind of like how you remember the Bruce Lee movie, Enter the Dragon, at the very beginning when he says to kick the moon and he points to the moon.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So that concept, if you point into the distance, the index finger, the fingers you're using to point, they're actually being more relaxed because the power of the muscles, the chi, the mind, everything is going through. And the hands that are being pulled back are more yin, more tense.
Yeah, that's in the
regard.
sports analogy, the follow through, right? When you throw a baseball, right? You follow through with the hand and you swing through with the hip, and then with the kick too. When you finish, you got to bring the hip, lead with the hip. So they're actually more relaxed but more powerful at the same time.
Yeah, the more relaxed you can be and throughout the body, the more in Chinese martial arts, we talk about being like a whip.
Mm-hmm.
And that whip, you have to be relaxed. And so, you know how a whip, it's that crack is going faster than the speed of sound. And that's how the crack works, right? And that's their power. So it's not like a big bulldozer coming through. It's that whip kind of action was joint to joint to joint to joint through the body and twists and moving like the hips, moving the waist, moving the spine. And so that kinetic energy can be rotated and pushed through into that last millisecond of like a punch where you tense up at contact, but then you relax immediately after that contact.
John, you're the best person to answer something like this. So in martial art novels or in movies, Qigong is always showing someone, who practice it be superhuman. I will ask you, in the movies or when people assume Qigong is, what is real, what is exaggerated, and what is simply fictional? Can you give us a couple of examples?
In movies, most of those things are wire fu and they come from, there's a series in Chinese, they call it wuxia series. And those are the novels, and they're more like comic book series for the Chinese readers. And those things are generally going to be exaggerated. And so a lot like the flying jumps and stuff like that. I've never seen anybody do that. I've never heard of a real person even bragging that they can do that. People have been able to do a thing called Qigong, which is called light skill.
Mm-hmm.
And they're able to jump really high, but we're talking about Michael Jordan kind of thing, not flying through the entire forest, sword fighting and stuff like that. So those things are kind of possible with Michael Jordan proving that he can fly. But martial arts, you do not want to do that in a fight. You don't want to be flying and stuff like that. That's just really fun movie stuff.
So are there any biggest myth or misunderstanding about Qigong that you would like to tell the martial arts community? How long does it take for me to be better? Like, we always wanted to do something and see results. Is it something that really slow and lifetime, or can one be benefit just by fine tuning some of the stress, right? The tension that you were talking about.
Generally speaking, they say if you practice for 100 days, you'll feel a difference. So that difference can vary between people. So sometimes people might get a benefit of better sleep or better digestion or just feeling all around better. There's not a textbook way of saying after doing 100 days, you'll be able to do this or do that, stuff like that, because your body's trying to give itself time to heal in a way before it can do a lot of the other stuff. It's trying to heal first. So people who have a hard time sleep will sleep better, for just as an example. So the differences will vary between people.
You mentioned that we hold tension, and I'm sure that you're right, because with the society that we're in, we're all stressed at the time, and then our neck is probably in a bad position because we're all texting and on the phone longer than we should. How does Qigong helps to realize that we're in a bad posture, or does it just the body self-regulate itself?
So the Qigong puts you into a good posture so you can stand proper, and then the tension will be less. So like if you're thinking of the beginning of a kata form, there's that posture, and then you open up the body in a certain way to allow the structure to take over. But a lot of times in karate, there's tension in the hands and there's tension in the whole way going through.
Mm-hmm.
In a Qigong form, it would be doing the same kind of thing, but open hand relaxation, allowing the gravity, the relaxation in the body, the lack of tension, excess tension, and allow that to go down and go through. And then you can start to form.
How long does it take to practice? You mentioned 100 days. So I'm thinking about regular people who wanted to explore it. Can they do it on their own, or do they need a experienced eye master like yourself to watch over them?
A lot of people do begin online now, and they're able to watch the videos and things like that. Some of the masters are pretty good at explaining very detailed how to get into the posture correctly. The only problem is there's no one there to really make sure that the person has it right or wrong. When I was teaching, I've had people hunched over and say, I'm standing, this is my natural stance. This feels normal for me. And I look at them and they're hunched over, their posture is terrible. So I'm like, I have to like pull them up and then say, no, 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 this is the proper posture. And they would say, no, but that doesn't feel natural. So
Because
what I
they're so
would
used
do
to
is
it already. They're used to
they're so
hunching
used to
or,
the bad
yeah.
posture, they think they're relaxed and are doing it correctly. But one way I would test them is the ones who are hunched over, I would put pressure on top of their head and go straight down.
Mm.
And they would just crumble because they're weak in that regard. And then when I get them to have a proper posture, I'd press down, the kinetic energy would go straight down through their body and they would be a lot stronger. Sometimes people would be leaning back in or arching their sacrum up. Their tailbone would be kind of coming up, and I would do that kind of pressure, and they can feel the tension in their lower back. And when you know how people talk about tucking the tailbone under,
Yeah.
when they start doing that properly, then the pressure goes straight down, and there is no tension, so there's no pain. And another test I would do is I would have them get into a good basic stance.
Mm-hmm.
I would push from one side of their shoulder straight across to the other. If there's too much tension, like in the shoulder or in the back or whatever, and I would immediately let go, they would fall towards me. But if they don't use the structure properly enough, have the right amount of tension, I would push them over. So I'm not trying to see how strong they are. I'm just allowing them to feel their bodies, to feel through their body. And then when I have them relaxed in different areas, then they become more and more and more stable. And then I can't push them very much. I'm not pushing them from the side going on. I'm facing them, pushing with my hand going with just my shoulder, just trying to get enough pressure on there for them to feel it out.
This is a very important concept. While you're saying, I really think that it connects with a lot of the things that I learned from weightlifting, right? Where you have to tuck in your tailbone, your body has to maintain in one piece so that it's stronger. Because if your posture is bad, then trying to lift something heavy, then you'll become a disaster because all your joints are out of place, your body mechanic is bad. But by what you're saying too, John, with the second example, where people actually stick their pelvics out, some of them I think are maybe they have more weights in the front on the stomach. They try to compensate it by leaning back so that they could start standing in an upright position. So that would consider, in your view, kind of like a yang type of alteration, right? So to let them know to be more aware of the body themselves. Yeah.
The arching of the lower back up, I've seen people who did not have a belly, but they just stuck their butt out for whatever reason. I actually seen more women and girls doing that, just as what they do. I'm not sure why women do that. So I have to make sure that they're doing that tucked in.
Mm-hmm.
As far as more of a yin or yang, it would be just too much tension in the lower back. And that extra tension in the lower back eventually starts to go up the spine into the neck and everything else. But it's also going to just create a lot of back pain that they could easily fix.
Wow. So all the problem that we might have can actually be fixed if you maintain a good posture throughout the day then, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sometimes it's that simple.
But then sometimes you're not aware of it because you're in your whatever position that you're comfortable in day in day out, like until someone expert like yourself, John, to point it out, like I might not even notice it.
Right. But as you've done karate for a long time, you probably would notice the differences, and a lot of good experienced martial artists should be able to feel that through, understand the reasons why to do the different kinds of postures. Weightlifting coaches, physical therapists, they all kind of know all these things. So it's not like a specific Qigong kind of thing. It's just the perspective and the outcome of their reasoning why they do what they do.
I do get called out by Sensei Tai a lot, like that with my posture. So, but thank you. But I do aware, like if you are in a good posture, in a good stance, right, then you are just so much stronger. It's still the same you, but then with all your bones stacked up, right, you're able to lift more. You can generate more power, and then in your way, you could relax more just by sleeping in the right position and not crumble up, weird. Then you have a stiff neck the next day.
Lots of things like that. Yeah.
You mentioned 100 days. Like, is it 2 hour practice? Is it 5 minutes? How long would a beginner needs to focus on to see the results with Qigong?
I would tell people start with 5 minutes once or twice a day,
Hmm.
just to get the ball rolling, and just pay attention throughout the rest of the day. So if you notice your posture during the practice, you start to be more aware of it. Then throughout the day, if you notice you have like too much tension or there's bad posture, you just, quickly change it. So it's more and more aware in your system and your mind.
That's a good advice because, again, going back to the phone, it's just a bad position. And then the more you do it, the worse it will get.
Yeah. And sometimes it's your people are looking down at their phone. Sometimes it's, oh, whoops. And they just look forward and bring the hands up, and
Yeah.
bam, you're back into a decent posture.
So speaking and asking question for martial artists now, like by practicing Qigong, can he or she become more relaxed without becoming weak or too loose?
In Qigong, it's kind of considered like internal work.
Mm-hmm.
And internal work is a very broad kind of idea of things. There's so many layers to it. So, for example, a lot of times people are very muscular,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't have a lot of tendon strength or a lot of bone strength. They just have big muscles. And so that's what people use for their strength. Whereas in internal work, we're working more with the structure of the body, learning how to breathe, use the internal muscles more so than the external muscles. So I'm talking about the muscles closer to the bone. In Tai Chi, we have a saying that it's cotton wrapped around iron. So the bones are very strong, but the external muscles are very soft.
It's a very good concept, but I know it's very hard to achieve. And I like that you point out that example because in the martial arts community, for the longest time, against people who lift weight, because they always say that you have all the muscle, but then you're not even strong to do the technique. You're muscle bound, right? But at the same time, I talk to martial artists who train in weight training, in strength training. They use more the tendon, they use more the body mechanics. So I love to dive deeper into that. A person who is muscle bound might not be strong, but in the same time, a person who might be smaller can use body tension, tendon tension to become stronger. Like, how would you point that out, and how would you train for that?
How to point it out? I guess one example would be sometimes there's the big buff people and they want to go into like one of those what's it called, the exercise boot camps where they have to do like 10 pull-ups, 20
Yeah.
push-ups, 10. They can't do that because they're using the wrong parts of the body. They can lift so much weight, but they're relying so much on their muscles that the muscles can't relax and open. So that's extreme. But if people do like 50 push-ups a day or something like that. I would not consider that like weightlifting. That's more calisthenics.
Hmm.
And that will also get the heart rate going. And that's another healthy benefit that's important to get. So the heavy weightlifting or bodybuilding versus weightlifting. A lot of doctors tell seniors just grab a small bottle of water and do curls.
Yeah.
And that's kind of technically weightlifting, but it's also not too much. So they're not getting muscle bound.
In the Chinese world, in the Chinese medicine world, does it say when it's good, or it really depends on the person? Because I do remember like being Chinese myself, like whenever my mom, my aunt see me do weightlifting, you're gonna damage your joints, you know, your muscle, you're gonna build muscle and you're gonna hurt your body. Is that true at all? Like, can you set the record straight for me, please?
Set the record straight is impossible in this world. Um,
Are
my
there too
personal
much, or like what would be the balance? Like if one wants to be stronger, right? I want to look better. I want stronger muscle. It makes you look good, right? But at what point do you notice maybe that might be okay? Like you don't want to go further in your standpoint.
go further, it would be instead of doing like 30 reps of something and putting more and more weights, but maintaining at the 30 reps, will start to build that muscle too much. But if you do a lighter weight, and then you start with 30, then you go to 40, and then you build up, but not adding more weight, then it's more of a calisthenic, and that will be pretty much, I would say, be healthy. What your family were saying, that's partially true, partially not true, because a lot of people do damage themselves, but that's
Hmm.
because they're not using proper alignment. There's a lot of people who hurt themselves doing karate. There's knees and hip replacements. That happens in the Chinese martial arts too. And a lot of times it's because they are not using the proper structure and the use of the muscles and tendons in a certain way. Then they hurt themselves. And then they'll have to have like a knee replacement or whatever because of the improper training. So there's correct way of doing the practice, and you can do a lot more than you can imagine. And then people do the kind of the wrong way, and knowing the difference is, well, in the podcast, it's hard to explain or show, but those two different problems, because a lot of people, they want to do it for more power or they do it for show.
Hmm.
Um, in Chinese martial arts, we have a thing called wushu, and that translates as martial art, but it's become a sport. And it's beautiful to watch. It's martial art gymnastics, very not practical. And a lot of these practitioners, by the time they're 25, they're too old to do it. But in real martial art training, the goal is to be able to do this practice as a senior. But if you're hurting yourself, then you can't be doing it as a senior. So there's that situation people come up with that they have to
So
face.
do you think it's just adaptation? So obviously when you're young, right, you're more flexible, you can move faster. There's certain movement they're available to you, but as you get older that might not be as flexible, and you might not have the same power to do crazy jumps. So is it more for the adaptation, or it's just the longevities for training that one should be mindful of when they train?
When people train, they have to consider their age and ability. So kids can do a lot more than adults can. As people age and grow and mature, the need for doing what the kids do is no longer needed even in the teens, because that starts to get too hard and too much for the body to handle. So a lot of times people, like one of my friends, he did a lot of skateboarding and a lot of mountain biking, and there was a lot of hardness to those sports, and his knees now really hurt. So it's harder for him to do the martial arts because of that when he was a teenager. And as a kid versus a teenager versus 20s, 30s, 40s, and so on, kids need to be conscious of doing the movements right so they don't hurt themselves. So when they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, or whatever, they can still move and live as a normal person without having to need surgery or whatever.
Let's go back to the Qigong, the actual breathing itself, because when I think about martial arts, there are a few type of breathing, right? So when you think about a boxer, like they take quick sips when they punch, right? And then when we sometimes do kata in karate, we do long inhale, long exhale. Do you practice different breathing techniques when you practice Qigong? And if so, can you give us a couple of examples or something slower, something faster?
I prefer doing the slow breathing. There's a lot of different breathing techniques. Some of your listeners might have heard of Wim Hof. He
Yeah.
has his own, right? He has a breathing technique, and according to the testimonials, it works really well. So I can't say much about that kind of breathing. But then there's slow, deep breathing in Qigong, which has several goals. One is to learn how to maximize the use of the lungs. So a lot of times people breathe probably into like the first half of their lungs, and then they quickly exhale. One study talks about people breathe roughly 11 to 12 times a minute. In Qigong practice, we're trying to go maybe 5, 4, 3, even 2 breaths per minute. So it's like an inhale 15 seconds, exhale 15 seconds kind of length. You don't fight your way to do it, you build your way to do it. So it takes time. But you're working with opening up the lungs, which will open up the ribs. You have to be relaxed for the ribs to be able to move with the lungs. And then there's also part of that practice is diaphragm breathing, but that's still up in the chest. And in Qigong, we want to drop the qi or drop the mind into the lower dantian, the lower abdomen. So the deeper you can breathe, the more you can relax into the core of the body.
Is it just like maybe a nerve sensation? Because I don't think you can actually have air into the dantian, but it's just the thought that goes through the body and it could make our lungs feel more air. Is that the practice, or am I making sense here?
Yeah, it's part of the practice. I mean, you're not going to you cannot get air into your lower abdomen. If you do, you probably have major surgery coming. That's not going to happen. But the sensation kind of feels like it. And then instead of the lungs doing the work, your lower abdomen is helping that work happen.
Mm.
So the movement there's a lot of movement going on in your lower abdomen as part of that, helping the lungs breathe.
So the sensation, because the understanding I have for some Chinese medicine is you can actually, if you know what you're doing, you could breathe in the qi and have it flow to different parts of your body to make that better or try to heal itself. So it's kind of that type of sensation, right?
Yeah, that kind of sensation. For example, I remember very specifically when I was in college, I didn't regulate my breathing very well, and I got pissed, and I did a boxer punch onto a wall, and I kind of broke my hand, broke my fourth metacarpal bone. Luckily, it wasn't a needed surgery. It didn't snap. It was a clean cut. But then in my practice, even with the cast on and I couldn't physically move my body, I was still doing my practice, but I would move my wrists, I'd move my fingers as if it weren't there, as if the cast was not there. And so my body still reacted as if it was there. So when I got my cast off, I was able to move without any stiffness. And
Nice.
then with that practice, I'd also put my mind into where the break was, and I would visualize the calcium and vitamin D or whatever makes the bone come back together. I would visualize that happening. And so my healing took about 4 weeks instead of the normal 6 weeks.
Wow. So when you say your master, when he goes walking, he's practice Qigong. You mentioned that a good Qigong person can do maybe 5 in and out per minute. So when he's walking, so he is doing the actual breathing itself, right? Or when he goes
Yeah.
through his day activity. It like is that possible to do at all? Like
Yeah, it's
when we get a tense situation, like sometimes we breathing get tense, right? So that's probably can calm yourself as well.
yeah, so they call it walking meditation.
Mm,
And it's a very common practice. It's done like the Tibetan monks do it, Tai Chi walking, everything like that. So it's just being very mindful of your walking. So it's not going from point A to point B, it's the journey in between going between the 2 points. So it's deliberate walking, deep breathing, working with the posture, obviously not being on the phone, and just being very in tune with the walking. And that would be part of the practice. So people think the practice has to be done. There's Qigong practice, and then you're done, and then you go to the rest of your daily life. But in Qigong, there, when you really start to understand it, there is no barrier between the two. So, for example, we're sitting here talking. I'm making sure my spine is straight. I'm relaxing my shoulders. I'm mindful of my breath in the back of my mind so I can still have a conversation with you, but it's still there. Even though
mm.
it's not part of my Qigong practice, I'm still mindful of it.
Yeah, because I know elite swimmer, they count their breath. So if they swim 100 meters, they know exactly how many breaths they will take. And I know that without the breath, then you can't really do anything. Like a lot of times we do a tense move and then we tense ourselves up by not breathing, and then you'll pay for it after, because if you might be able to do one or two technique pretty well, right, holding your breath, but then in the long run you get out of wind, then you'll be sucking wind for the rest of the activity.
Right. So the practice of breathing is very that important, especially like in martial arts when you're sparring. You can't, if you're out of breath, you're gonna be out of breath, and then your opponent can defeat you more easily because you're simply out of breath, right? So the breathing helps in that. But during like a Qigong practice, unlike with swimming, you're saying that they have to count their breath.
Hmm.
In Qigong, some people say count your breath so you're aware of your breathing. Some say don't worry about it at all. So it depends on how you want to go with that kind of practice. But the similarity between the two is learning how to have deeper breaths.
Yeah, because in form there are specific way depending on the forms that we do, right? Where you breathe out,
Yeah,
where you inhale, where you take a deeper breath, and especially in karate, when do you ki? Sensei Tai always talked about you don't ki from your lung, you actually come from the dantian, which you talked about, right? Then
exactly.
he actually does that, and he sounds a lot more powerful, right? When he yell, like you actually, I'm actually
Yeah, I mean,
afraid and shocked when he does it.
right. So a lot of times I've watched like karate forms on YouTube and they scream when they do the
Yeah,
kya, and
they
it's just,
scream. Yeah.
I kind of close my eyes and go, oh, I wish they knew what they were doing. But like what Sensei Tai shows you, yeah, it's coming from the lower abdomen, the lower dantian. And so it's like a breath, not a scream, not something to try to scare the other person. It's there to show, not to show, but to really have a good exhale. So when you're punching, you have to exhale. Sometimes when you block, you have to exhale. But sometimes when you block, you actually inhale. I mean, it depends on the situation, on how you want to redirect the punch. There's a whole lot, it depends on this, depends on that, and that just comes with a lot of experience and practice. But a lot of times, you'll make mistakes and then you learn from those mistakes.
Thanks for sharing that. In the end, I like to ask you a question. You mentioned, the simple practice, and I know that we're doing a audio podcast. I know that there's a practice called Jamzhong. Would you able to walk us through simple practice, and can it be done through the words?
Onto the words, maybe we'll find out. So, what the Zanzong means standing post, and a lot of times standing post is done with the feet about shoulder width apart. There's a article I was reading years ago, and the master was saying, our hands are smart, our feet are dumb. So part of the Zhanzong is to really learn how to connect your feet to the ground, how you use the muscles in your feet, where's the weight distribution on the bottom of your feet. A lot of times people put too much weight into the arch of the foot, where they need to actually roll it out just a little bit, so there's more pressure on the outside of the foot. And then the weight going forward and back, it needs to be more on the small of the foot, just behind the balls of the feet. So there's that kind of a sweet spot for the body to just relax into. So that's the feet. The knees need
and
to
then
be
it's pointing forward, straight.
the feet
pointing
need to
forward?
be pointing forward. When
Okay.
the feet are pointing outward, that puts too much tension, like back rotation in the hips, and it can put too much torque into the knees. If your feet are pointing too far inward, then that can rotate the hips inward too much and cause tension in that way. So the natural standing posture, the feet pointing, the middle toes more or less pointing forward. Doesn't have to be perfect, but close enough works.
I'm doing it right now, John, as you say, but keep going, please.
Okay, so the knees need to be slightly bent, just unlocked. Sometimes people want to go into the Zhanzong and kind of do like a horse stance. The problem with that is that your goal is to do a horse stance leg training and stretching and stuff with the horse stance, which is very different than the Zhanzong. At better experience and higher levels of practice, you can mix the two. But generally speaking, when you do Zhanzong, you don't want to worry about the strengthening of the legs or martial art posture.
So like a Michael Brand, but don't hyperextend the knee.
Right. Do not lock the knees. Do not bend the knees too much. Just unlocked. So I tell my students, so your knees can dance a little bit.
Okay.
Then you go to the hips, the lower back where the sacrum is. I talked about tucking the tailbone underneath. Sometimes people push the hips up, so the whole hip's going to rotate up, and then I don't know if you know who Urkel, that TV show. I forgot the name of the TV show, but there's that character Urkel. Some of the listeners might remember from the 80s. He would walk with bad posture. His hips was rolled up, and they would say, "Oh, I've seen people do that." And I say, "Oh, I'm tucking my tailbone." They're not tucking it. They're shoving the hips forward and up.
So I got to engage with my butt muscle a little bit. I got to bring kind of like tense it a little.
I would say not too tense. I mean, think about if you have a heavy tail or weights on something heavy on the sacrum, it would just fall down.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing it now.
Right. So there's not too much tension in going into the legs for it.
Okay.
So it's kind of like hanging something down.
So like it's there, but you're not really flexing it.
You're not really flexing it, but there's like a slight tuck under, in addition to letting it drop down.
Okay.
So it's everything here is like slight, but you'll feel the weight drop, and that's what you want to do, is feel the weight drop.
Okay. What about the shoulder and the chest?
Then I usually actually don't go to the shoulder. I go through the spine. So with the spine, you want to have the spine kind of millimeter by millimeter rolling itself up. You don't want to straighten your back or arch your back. Our spine has a beautiful curvature to it. What we want to do is allow that to happen. So there's not forcing anything. In Tai Chi, they talk about being suspended from the heavens and just letting the spine do that. In my Qigong practice, we talked about being the pillar between heaven and earth. So there's a slight press up. But when I say slight, you're not trying to reach or look over a wall or something. You're just a slight press upward.
Mm.
And then for the scapula needs to drop. A lot of times people have too much tension in there. So you want to allow the scapula it kind of feels like your scapula is going to go into your hips. That kind of relaxation drop. And that will help drop your shoulders.
I feel more aligned right now. Like I'm doing it while you're talking. I do feel that I'm aware that maybe off a little, but then when you point out like the concept, I adjust it somewhat. I do feel like I'm stacked up against the spine a lot better than what I normally would hold my regular posture.
That's good. That's
And
good.
where do I look? Like, do I look to the horizon or do I look down?
Yeah, you want to look for your eyes, you want to look straight ahead or just below. So you're looking into the horizon or just below.
Okay.
Sometimes people like to close their eyes, and that's kind of debatable. But if you keep your eyes open, allow yourself to blink, you're not staring hard, a hard stare at anything, but you have a light look into the horizon,
Mhm.
and then your peripheral vision starts to open up all around you. And so you're also working with the eyes, but you're working with the peripheral as well, not just like what you're focused on. If you're too focused on something, and I've actually had this happen, people fainting.
Wow.
They're so focused on that, their vision just started blacking out, and I had to catch someone one time
Yeah. That's not
because
fun.
they were too much into the stare.
Mm. What about the breathing? Like, can you walk us through, like, if we have the posture right, how do we breathe?
To start with the breathing, just allow your body to relax. So you can start with deep breaths into the lungs to open them up and then bring it lower with your focus and then go into the diaphragm, just going, okay, I'm going to breathe through there. And then keep breathing into the lower dantian. So in that practice of lower dantian, you want to eventually what starts to happen, your body relaxes and then actually starts to feel like you're breathing through your feet as well.
Mm.
But that takes a while to get into. But if you're starting off, just go down to the lower dantian.
So, do I try to breathe as long as I can and exhale as long as I can, or is there a
Comfortably.
time? Yeah, preferably.
To breathe comfortably, and then as you breathe comfortably and you let go of the excess tension, you will naturally start to breathe deeper.
The in and out should be the same length of time, right?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
And then you want to, some people say to breathe in your nose, out your mouth. In my practice, it's always through your nose. So you inhale through your nose, exhale through your nose.
Nice.
Someone asked about that to my master, and you're going to like this one. He said, your eyes are for seeing, your nose is for breathing, and your mouth is for kissing.
That's a good concept.
So you're breathing through your nose.
Mm.
And one of the reasons is you're taking your tongue and you're touching to the roof of the mouth.
Mm.
So you have to breathe through your nose.
Okay. And should you do it inside or outdoor?
Depends on a lot of different things to fit the weather and stuff like that. If you have a yard or something that's relaxing, then go
Mhm.
for it.
Okay.
But some people might live near, it's not a nice something relaxing
Like the
outside to look
pollution and
at.
noisy things like that.
Pollution or really loud, obnoxious neighbors.
Mhm.
Some people live in an apartment or something, they would have to go downstairs and it's outside and it's a noisy city. Sometimes like that, it'd be nicer and easier and more relaxing to do it in in the living room or in the bedroom or whatever that works. So as long as you're doing the practice, go for it, but don't go into like an area that's going to cause you more tension.
Mm. And you say just start 5 minutes a day, maybe a couple times a day if you can.
Yeah, just when you wake up first thing in the morning, or go to the bathroom first, do whatever you need to do, and then get into the practice before you go into bed, or while a lot of people even just do that stance when they're waiting for the water to boil
Mm.
for coffee. So there's lots of times you can practice.
John, thanks for working with me. I think I'm going to definitely go back to this conversation, but using your word to guide me through, I already feel that I'm taller already.
That's good.
For a listener who wanted to find out more about you, your work, your book, and your YouTube channel, what would be a best way to reach out to you?
I prefer the email.
Okay. And I will list your email on the show notes. And John, thank you so much for coming on today. You answered a lot of my questions, and you give me a lot to work on.
Thank you, Swire, for having me come to your podcast. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.